Hello Steelers, and welcome to this review of Fireball Forward, the World War II company level wargaming rules, or tactical rules I suppose it says on the cover there. This is by Mark Fastoso and also Jonathan Miller. I think it's originally published in about 2012. I've had my eye on it for a while. I've known about it for a long time, and I know a lot of people are big fans of Fireball Forward. And I was talking to Mark Mantic over on my Storm of Steel Wargaming group page, and he suggested that I get into it because he knows that I liked I Ain't Been Shot Mum and a lot of the Lardy rules as well, and he thought that it was something that I would like, so it's kind of pushed me over the edge. Also, the guys over at Little Wars TV have made some recent videos about Fireball Forward. Their game of Foy was a Fireball Forward game, and also I've been told on the download that they are going to be doing a review of this as well. This is my review is not to jump theirs, but it is certainly just because I thought I wanted to do one anyway, because I've kind of had my eye on this for a while. I always have a little bit of trepidation about new rules. Because I like a certain set of things in rules. I like to see certain things. I like to see friction. I like to see fog of war. I like to see, abstraction as well to an extent. And I like to see how leaders work and how they operate and how they, work on the tabletop as well. And I've got to say that I was absolutely bowled over by what I actually read in Fireball Forward. I have yet to play a game of it, I'm going to say that here and now. However, I know rules enough to kind of work out in my head how they are actually going to work on the table, and these look fantastic. What I've got to say here is I've been in touch with Mark because there was something in the rules I wanted to ask him about. I talked to him on Twitter, and he asked me to mention in this review that he will be setting up a new wargaming channel called Mark's Games Room, I think it is, and that'll be on the 6th of June 2023. Obviously D-Day, so something to look out for. Keep your eye out for that. I shall share a link as soon as he releases it, and judging by the videos that he's done with Little Wars TV, I'm sure it's going to be a pretty good channel because he's involved in the TV world anyway. So there's something I'm looking forward to, and I think you should too. Now, I want to say that I bought this, and I bought this through the Wargames Vault. It's about $25 thereabouts, which is about 20 quid UK price, and I got this then printed over at Docs Direct. It cost me about £10 to get it done, very quick service, and then because I just find it easier to read than PDFs. I do believe that there are physical copies available. I'm not sure how available they are, but it does say on the Fireball Forward website, because there is a Fireball Forward website, that there are physical copies available, but you'd be easier to probably get a PDF. When I spoke to Mark, I mentioned I was going to do a review of this, so he very, very kindly also sent me this copy as well. So he sent this one through for free. This is the Stalingrad scenario book. So this adds a lot more granularity to the scenarios that are already in Fireball Forward, because there's a couple of Soviet ones. I'm going to talk about those in depth in the actual review itself. And I'm going to look at this one as well with a little bit more detail, just to show you how a scenario book rules. I also got this again printed over at Docs Direct. So again, once again, thank you to you, Mark, for sending this through, and also thanks to Docs Direct for printing it up as well. So I say, I sometimes approach rules with a little bit of trepidation, and I was absolutely blown away by this. Just how interesting it is from looking at other typical Second World War war games rules. This really stands out for the level that it's at. I think in my mind it's probably its biggest competitor is possibly I Ain't Been Shot Mum, which is a great game in itself, but I think I'm not sure which pips the post in my world which is better. I think they're both very different, but there are some great things in Fireball Forward that I'd be I'm looking forward to playing it. As I say, I've not played it yet, but I am looking forward to getting it on the table because I think it's a very dynamic game. So it's really for 20 or 15mm figures. You can use existing based figures, so things like Flames of War, you can just reuse them because it's just done on elements. Each element is either a team or a squad. Doesn't matter how many figures are on the base, just multiple bases, and then you have an individual commander as well on a smaller base. And then you have teams such as machine guns and snipers and mortars and what have you. They're all on individual bases as well. So it's all done on bases, it's not individual figure removal, and it's about them taking shock and then getting dispersed through fire. And it's all very relatively simple stuff, and I like rules that have a very simple mechanic to them, stuff that you can hold in your head as you're playing the game, so you're not referring back to the rule book. And I think this is something as well that is also said in the design notes. There's extensive design notes in here. They just talk about they want the game to represent those thrilling accounts of the Second World War that you read about. Stuff like, you know, the Band of Brothers TV series, for example. I mean, that's the first scenario in here anyway. I'll show you that again in more detail in a bit. But it's, you know, obviously across the entire globe of the war, and the entire the full experience of all the men who were fighting in that war. And I think, you know, it really will, it provides a really dynamic game by the looks of it. And again, having watched the Little Wars battle reports, you can kind of see that coming through. And I'm actually very enthusiastic to play this game and looking forward to it. Right, so what I'll do is, I'll go through the rules in a little bit more detail. I'm not going to go through everything. I'll kind of, it's going to be a bit of a flip through, you know, but I'm going to talk about some of the specific things that I really like in this, and I'll give you a breakdown of basically how the some of the more basic rules work, you know, like the movement, the firing, that kind of thing. I'm not going to go into the granularity of the smaller stuff because there's no point, because that's why you should pick the game up. But then I'll also talk about some of the scenarios in here as well, and then we'll also have a look in a bit more detail at this scenario book, just as a typical scenario book, to show you how they're laid out and to show you what kind of things you get in them. What I want to say is as well, just before we go into that, the scenario books themselves, although they are specific to Fireball Forward, you can use them for any game at this level, to be perfectly honest. It just has, you know, the rules are set out as Fireball Forward, but you could quite easily just use this for I Am Being Shot Mom. You could use it for Flames of War, whatever you wanted to, really, but it will still work, you know, for those. So have a look at these as well, just as really good in-depth scenarios for your World War II games as much as anything else, but you'll see that when we go through it in a bit more detail. So I'll show you those right now and stop talking for a second. Okay, so here we have the book, and as I say, I got this one printed over at Docs Direct. First things I want to say is actually layout is really nice. It's full of little illustrations like this, cartoonish kind of illustrations based on original photos. You see here's, and the actual layout of it is really nice as well. It actually reminds me of the Games Designer Workshop rules and their layout as well. It's just very nice. And what you've also got as well is you've got your main rules in the block here, but then you also have these grey passages on either side and the margins, which also not only give you examples of gameplay, but also just explain some of the rules and things as well, just as, you know, just as design notes. And I really like that because it's a nice way of being able to read the rules whilst having an example right next to you. So for example, here we've got a game turn, and then it gives you a game turn sequence over here, specifically using one of the scenarios later on in the book itself as well, so you can look at the map and you can even lay this out as you're learning the game. And this is one of the things I want to say very much about the game, is that it's actually broken into sections. So the simple stuff, so like the game turn, the move action, I'm going to come back to this in a second, firing actions, spotting, rally, opportunity actions, close combat, machine gun teams, terrain, some more terrain, and then, sorry, he stops here, we get to setting up a scenario. Stop, you can now play scenario 1, Easy Company, and that's within 18 pages, so you only need to read that bit and you can get your first scenario on the table. And it's a very simple scenario as well, very easy to use, and that you will find at the back over here somewhere. Let me just find that. There's a hell of a lot of scenarios in this, but let me just... So here we go, scenario section here, page 57. easy company. And then we've got a full briefing, explanation, a bit of background history, a little bit of what happened after the battle, then rules for the game itself, and also just how to set up your forces as well. Pretty typical stuff for a scenario, as you can see, but also the deployment map as well. So what I say is, you are now following these examples here just to talk about these, and these are referencing exactly how it is over here, how they are on the map itself. So you're just basically flipping back and forth if you need to. Really nice way of doing things, and this is the same with all the other later rules as well, which I'm not really going to talk too much about, simply because it's there's a lot of it and I don't want to go too through. But you know, we get to page 43 before we talk about Soviets, and then you know, this also then ties in with scenario 8, the bridegrooms of death, for example. So these are all, again, specific examples. And then look here again, stop, you can now play scenario 8, the bridegrooms of death. So each time you are reading new rules, you're introducing them with a scenario specific, which really works. I think it's a really nice way of doing it. There's not that many rules, I don't think, they do it. They kind of just lay them out, whereas this, being able to point specifically to a specific scenario and situation, I think really works in rules writing. It's just a good way to learn, I think. I mean, everyone learns differently, but of course, but that's just the way it is. So we do have a table of contents. There is one thing, there is no index, but there is a table of contents. I would have liked to have seen an index, but you know, you can't have everything. But we do have a table of contents. And to be fair, it's pretty well laid out anyway, so you can jump pretty quickly to where you need to go, when you're actually looking for whatever it is that you need, what particular rules you need at that point. And as I said, this is basically it's company level, so we are dealing with squads. They do have teams, rifle teams in the game. However, there's only a couple of them, and I think they're not very. There's not a huge amount of them in any of the big rules. The rifle team would be in example, for example, the first Band of Brothers scenario, rather than any of the other bigger ones. So these are the different types of elements you'd have. So an individual is a commander or a sniper or forward observer. Then you have your squad, which is your typical thing, so about 4 or 5 figures on a base. So as I say, pretty similar to the layout for Flames of War, for example. Team is anything smaller than that, so that's bazooka teams, machine gun teams. Then you've got crude weapons, armoured vehicles, and then soft vehicles as well. So very typical for your Second World War kind of wargaming. Jumping ahead, we now have the game turn, and this is where things get interesting, because the way this works is you use a normal deck of cards. Normally, I don't like decks of cards, normal decks of cards being used in games, in war games in particular. I just have a thing about it. But this has kind of made me see the light a little bit. It's really nice. You basically you shuffle the cards. Black cards are Axis, red cards are allies. No matter who you're playing, you know, if you're Japanese or German, you're going to be initiating on the black cards, whereas the allies, whoever it is, US, Soviets, British, are going to be activating on the red cards. And you draw a card. If it's red or if it's black, whichever colour it is, you draw another card. Well, of course it's going to be one of the other. You draw a second card. If it's the same colour, you keep going. And you keep going until you draw the opposite colour. So say you might draw 3 red cards and then you draw a black card. When you draw that black card, you then put that black card back on the deck. And then you have the red cards, the 3 red cards that you have, then become your activations. So in that case, that would be 3 activations for the allies. They would then take 3 numbered chits, and they would decide which elements they are then going to activate and in what order. And I think that's a really nice, quick, easy way of doing some initiative that is random enough, but is also has a lot of fog of war in it as well. And I really think it's a really nice little innovative way of doing it. And you just do that until everything has activated at some point throughout the term. So once you've activated those 3 units, then you start drawing the cards again. So you will go back to that. You know the next one is going to be a black card. If the card after that is black, you keep drawing again until you draw a red card, and then again the enemy, in that case the Axis, would then have their activations doing the same. So if they drew 4 cards straight after that were black, they would have 4 activations, numbered 1 to 4, and you've got to decide what's going to activate first, how are you going to activate it, and just thinking about how you're plotting out your turn. And I think that is a really, really nice way of doing it. We also have initiative chips as well, which are scenario specific. Some units have got more initiative than others, and these can be used as well. So they're either single use, so they'll disappear once they're spent, but you can activate a unit. They could be permanent, where they keep coming back, or they're revolving, which means they're given between the 2 players. So one side takes initiative, then the second side takes the initiative chip and can use it in their turn. And that's again just another little bit of friction, just to add in there, just to add a little bit more special sauce for the initiative without going too crazy. So it's but again, it is very scenario specific, and I really like this. And as I say, this has kind of turned my head a little bit because I just don't like having playing cards as part of a game. I prefer cards specific to a game, but in this case it works pretty well. I don't know if you'd be able to do it with chips from a bag, because you have to put the card back. If you were drawing 4 red cards, for example, you drew the black card, you'd have to put the black card back, whereas it'd randomise it too much from a bag. So you can't really do it. It has to be done with cards, but you could quite easily just make up your own, fireball forward black and red cards, I guess. Very, very simple. So each element has an action when they are activated. Generally, infantry units can either move, they can fire or spot if they are an element designated to recon, or they can rally. If they are already broken, they have to rally, or they've been fired or suppressed, should I say, they have to rally, and then they can do something else as well. And also individual elements such as the leaders do the same, but they also get a spot action as well, because they are classed as recon. So it says here, broken elements can only conduct a rally action, and that's it. You've got to successfully rally. You can conduct any remaining actions. Moving. Let's get on to moving. Now, I'm not a fan, as followers of this channel might know, I'm not a fan of fixed movement rates. I'm very much in the variable movement rates camp, although there's very, very few games outside of the Too Fat Lardies that actually do variable movement. This is slightly different. You have a movement rate, a fixed movement rate. So, for example, infantry is 12 inches. Most vehicles, I think it's about 6 inches, depends on the vehicle. But it's a radius, so you don't move in a straight line 12 inches, you can move anywhere within 12 inches. So basically you take a typical ruler, you move it around the figure that you're moving or the base that you're moving, and they can move anywhere. But what you do is you trace the line, so it's a little bit like Crossfire in that doesn't have any fixed movement rates or movement rates. You're basically moving from cover to cover, and then you get interrupted by the enemy. So this is how it works. You trace your line, and then if the enemy has a unit that can see or fire at them, they can then take opportunity fire as they're moving through their line of sight. And again, I think that's a really nice way of doing things. Really speeds stuff up. You don't have to measure directly to a point. You just draw a line, or work out a line, get a ruler, and then just move the piece to where you're moving it to. And I think that's a really nice way of doing things. Really smooth, really effective. And it's a good way of using what are nominally fixed movement rates, but actually you could end up moving, up to 48 inches if you want to move backwards and forwards along things, moving up and down, as long as you stay within that. I think fans of the game call it the magic circle, so Mark tells me. And I just think it's a really nice, classy, elegant way of dealing with movement, and again, just to spot, just to move through it. Really simple, really nice. Also, on top of this as well, we have a really nice way of firing, and I really like this. What we do is we have white dice and red dice. And you have a certain number of red dice and white dice for each unit firing, depending on the unit. So, for example, an infantry unit would only fire a red and a white dice. You roll them both together. You basically need, if you are on the white dice, if you're firing infantry or a soft target that's moving in the open ground, which is opportunity fire, you need a 4 or above. If your infantry or soft, if they are not moving on open ground, so basically they're hitting the ground, you don't even have to declare it. You hit on a 5 or above, and this is on the white dice. The red dice will always hit on a 6 and nothing else. So you've got 2 chances of hitting things. One is always on a 6, one is potentially on a 4 or a 5 if you're shooting at someone that's moving. The other thing as well, you've got a couple of these dice roll modifiers. Now, first one is if it's in hardcover. I'm just going to talk about this one first because it's simple. It's a -1 on your dice modifier, so that would then become, rather than a 5, that would become a 6. That rather than a 4, that would become a 5. The other one, it says target is within the sum of the ranged dice. You get a +1. Now, this is the really interesting part of the firing. When you fire, you have an effective range. So, for example, an infantry unit is 10 inches. They also get, though, to roll on top of that a ranged dice. I think it's D20 for infantry. Let me just have a quick look. Oh, straight to it. There we go. Yes, D20. So you can see here, rifle squad, movement 12 inch, ranged dice 20, effective range 10 inch, and then anti-infantry red and white is 1/1, so that is 1 white dice, 1 red dice. This was a question I asked Mark about here. Just to tell you here, this is a rifle team. It says 1/1. A lot of people ask this because it's not actually clear in the rules. It said red needs to be greater than 3. So basically, you can only hit on the white dice if your red is greater than 3 as well. It's just a bit harder to hit as a rifle team. But anyway, that's just to throw that in there to cover that up. But the ranged dice, you roll the ranged dice when you're firing. If you are outside of that range, then you can't hit them. So you roll your red and white D6s, and then your red range dice on top of that, and all 3 have got to be, So let's say we've got a German squad away from a US squad. That the US squad is firing at it. They are 15 inches away. So your effective range for the US is 10 inches. They have then got to roll over a 5 on their D20. I mean, that's relatively, that's 15 in 20 chance for 3/4 chance of doing it. So it's quite effective. But then obviously the further away they are, the less chance you have, because, bullets don't just fall off at a certain distance. They actually, there's lots of elements when it comes to firing at somebody, especially when they're fighting, they're under combat conditions, and there's so many different factors that just will change the effective range. So what this means here is basically it says the target is within the sum of the ranged dice. So if in this case, let's say we're firing at some Germans, they're only 5 inches away, and you roll on your D20, because you'd roll it anyway, even if they're within effective range. If you roll 5 or less, they are then suddenly at close range. So they get a +1 to hit on that white dice modifier. And this is a really nice, again, more friction. It really adds to it. I think it's a really nice, brilliant little system that just adds a lot to the game. It makes you think about firing, if you can actually do it, and if you're going to be able to hit, not just on the normal dice anyway, but also on that range dice. And I think it's a really elegant way of just introducing that little bit extra friction that helps the game go on. The other thing as well is whenever a unit is hit, they are suppressed. They will take a morale check. They just have to roll over their morale. Averagely, this is going to be about 4, so 4 on a 4d6. But then if you take 2 hits and you fail both those morale checks, you are destroyed. Very simple, very easy, very quick. You can rally off. You will automatically, if you are hit, you will automatically become suppressed, but you shake it off when they are next activated. But they are currently suppressed until that point. And then the other thing is just rallying yourself off as well. I'm not going to talk too much about the other rules because most of it pretty much follows a lot of other similar rules. So if you know anything about Second World War wargaming, you know most of this will be relatively similar to you from other rule sets and things. So I mean, we have opportunity fire, for example. So this is when somebody else is moving and you've got somebody in position to potentially fire at them. You can do that. Close combat is simply a single roll on both dice with a number of modifiers, and then the difference between the two dice is the amount of hits that has been that are applied onto the loser, and then they have to do morale checks. Same again, 2 morale losses is the unit is destroyed. Nice and quick, nice and easy. This kind of stuff is things that you can just hold in your head after you've probably played it a couple of times quite easily, because you could only use a couple of these anyway. These close combat circumstances and your dice roll modifiers. So look, so at least one friendly good order leader in the combat's +1. Engineer, SMG, Pioneer is +1. Obviously with flamethrowers and SMGs. Banzai charge, only the Japanese are using that, +1. If it's a team element, -1. If the element is broken, or a gun crew, -2. Pretty simple stuff, like I say. This is things that you'll be able to remember pretty quickly while you're playing it quite easily. Then we just have a little bit more about here about weapons, machine gun teams, terrain, specific terrain types, and just how, even here, talking about how to set up a scenario, and a bit more detail on terrain as well. Terrain is one of the things that is probably a little bit more complex, because there's a little bit more work on it with more varying terrains, because obviously this isn't meant to cover the entire Second World War. We have other things as well which are typical to Second World War gaming. So we've got snipers, then we've got armoured vehicles. Armoured vehicles are relatively similar in their firing action. They also use a white dice and a red dice as well. They have move actions which are similar to the other ones. Armoured vehicles firing is similar to infantry firing in that it has it is done with red and white dice again, so also with the range dice. However, once it's hit, you check the penetration of the gun that's firing in the charts themselves, and there's tons and tons of I think pretty much surely every armoured vehicle is covered at least in here, or you can just see here some of the charts of the armoured vehicles there at the back. And then basically the armour, you just roll dice to see if you block the penetration. So you basically roll 1d6 for each point of armour listed on the armour chart. So say for example 3, and then if you roll a 1, you block no penetration. If you roll a 2 to 5, it's 1 penetration. 6 blocks 2 penetration. And then a critical hit is scored. If a critical hit is scored, you get a 1 or a 2 blocks 0 penetration as well. And so it's a very simple thing. If you have more penetrations than blocks, then pretty much that is a tank on. So it says if the target blocks penetration equal to the final penetration value, they take a morale check. If it fails, it becomes broken morale, and a move marker is immediately replaced with a no move marker. If the target blocks fewer points of penetration than the final penetration value, the target is destroyed. So it's that simple. Nice and quick, nice and easy. Like the rest of the firing and the rest of the game, really. Kind of stuff that would very simply sit in your head as you're playing it. So we have other stuff here as well. We've got armoured vehicles here, special weapons, so tank held, anti-tank stuff, specific terrain types. As I say, it goes back to a lot to terrain. Terrain is quite an important part of this, but we've got smoke, mortar teams, artillery, grenades. I haven't looked at this stuff in detail at this point, so I'm not going to go through it too much, but it's pretty typical to, you know, Second World War wargaming, the same kind of thing. Follows similar kind of rules as the earlier stuff. Then we've got off-board artillery as well. This is very simply done. You basically roll just a couple of dice to see if you can get the artillery, and that's pretty much it. Nice and easily done. Minefields are covered. Again, more terrain. Then we come on to air support, towed guns, terrain, and then also Soviets. They get their own section as well because they have slightly different rules. Soviet mass assaults, the Ura rule, for example. Then we've got rafts, small boats. We then come on to the Japanese, or flamethrowers first. Then we've got the Japanese as well. Jungle terrain is all covered, and then, as I say, we are then, you know, pushing into these different scenarios each time a new part is introduced into the game rules themselves. Cavalry is covered, demo charges are covered. We then have some optional rules here, so we've got blinds as well if you want to it, so it's hidden rules and spotting without a referee. So this would be if you've just got 2 players, because otherwise the game suggests to be controlled by a referee, so you might want 3 players. So the referee would have obviously God's eye view, knowing where everything is, but the other players wouldn't. And then I mentioned we got extensive design notes, and we have quite a lot here. So, you know, this is just talking about the specifics of the game and what they wanted to get out of it, and how they thought about it when they designed it. And it's really nice to see this kind of thing. I like design notes just to give you an idea into the mind of the designer, just to give them to allow them to talk you through what they did. Then, as I say, we're onto the scenarios. I've already shown you this, but just to reiterate it, basically this is the first one. This is Easy Company attacking the Breville Manor gun position. That's from Band of Brothers. I mean, how many wargamers have played this so many times? And this is actually on the 2 foot by 3 foot table, so this is only small, really small map. But as I say, we've got an introduction, historical introduction, we've got the outcome of the historical action, then we've also got the briefing. This shows you how many actual units you have and what each of those units are made up of. So we've got Easy Company headquarters, rifle platoon, machine gun platoon, and then variable forces, which you will roll for, so you don't always know what you're going to get. Sometimes you'll get some different things, sometimes you'll get tanks, you might get some other bits. Then we've got the German briefing, same again, battery headquarters, 105 batteries, battery defence platoon, and then also variable forces as well on top of that. Then we've got the victory conditions, if anybody has initiative, and also where you set up on the table. And just some of the extra rules as well, just for the specific scenario, because it is very much a scenario-based game, more so than just, you know, throw everything on the table. You can do that if you want to, but I think this is a game that we're better off played with these scenarios. Just to take you through some of these, so we've got stuff like Pouperville here, tank attack at Lafayette, this is Normandy stuff, I can't read that one, Choctaw Warrior, there we go, still all out in Normandy. Devils in the Dark, it's not all Normandy, I've got to say. Rotanischemi, this is in Sicily. Taming the Tiger, Sicily again. This is the Spanish division. This is the Bridegrooms of Death Spanish division in Eastern Europe versus Soviets. So the first Soviet one. Then we have the Bear, which is against the Japanese. The US Marines against Japanese. It's an interesting deployment map there. Jungle, fields, and this is only a 5-length game turn. So yeah, we've gone basically all the way across. Then we've got Red Cavalry here, so another bigger Eastern Front game scenario. The Rotenbourmans, France, 1940, and don't forget, I mean, a lot of these, although they are specific to a period and to a particular campaign, these can quite easily just be changed around. You could quite easily, you know, just put a different unit in these. It doesn't have to be French, it could be Russians. The Guards counter-attack near the tractor factory at Stalingrad. We'll talk a little bit more about that in the Stalingrad rules. I just want to show you that, really. St. Lambert, Canadians and Germans. Oh, we do have an index. I do apologise. We do have an index right here. I didn't see this. It's mixed in with all the quick reference stuff. There we go. There's the reference. There's the index. 10 points for that, if nothing else. Then we've got the quick reference charts. So it's basically on 2 pages. And then terrain reference as well, if you need it, 2 pages of that. And then also the infantry element stats as well, which just give you pretty much everything. How many dice they fire, what their range dice is they fire, and movement as well. So really nice, simple stuff. And then we just have the references for all the vehicles. I'll just nip through those so you see them all. tons and tons of stuff in here. And then artillery reference, special rules for the Red Army, other special rules for fighter bombers, for vehicle movements and morale, other special rules for dive bomber air support. Then you also get tokens as well, so you can actually just cut these out, stick them onto cardboard, laminate them, do what you want, you know, if you don't have any tokens yourself, but easily done. And then also just some smoke markers as well. Final thing, that's it, back page, done. So that's Fireball Forward itself. Now here is the Stalingrad scenario book, and as I said, I'm just going to have a quick look at this rather than anything else. This is just going to be a quick look through, just to show you how these things are laid out as well. And there are tons of these covering all over the war, and I'm fairly sure there's going to be quite a few coming. This one I think took a little while, just simply because Mark had a son and it took about 7 years. This was released in 2021, so it is quite new. I think this is possibly the latest one. Mark asked me if I wanted any particular ones, and I said Stalingrad because I'm interested in Stalingrad. But we've got a little bit of design background as much as anything else. We've also it's just talking really about why Mark looked at this particular set of scenarios and what interested him to do it, and also what's interesting here is the amount of research he did in this, and also the discrepancies in that research that he found whilst researching, if that makes sense. So that's interesting. And then we've got a history section as well on Battle of Stalingrad. I noticed a few typos in here and there, but you know, these things you expect, don't you? It's difficult to get people to read things and notice everything, but I just noticed, picked up on a couple of typos. You're always going to get that. It's not enough to put me off. But we've got a good, interesting history covering all of the scenarios that you're going to see in this book, explaining the background of them, what was happening, the actual cut and thrust of the battle itself. Then we have the scenario locations: Central Stalingrad 1942, just to show you basically where everything is, the nail factory, the Univermag department store, House of Specialists, railroad station number 1, Tooth and Nail. So this is, you know, the overall map of the thing. Then specific buildings for this particular scenario. These are all quite small, to be perfectly honest. They look big, but they're not. It just shows you how they're divided up on the table. So you only need a few buildings really. Let's have a look. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 different types of buildings. And if you really wanted to, you could just cut these out of cardboard squares, as long as you know where the different individual areas are. Now this is a good bit. This just shows you the units that you need to play Stalingrad. So it shows you the different types of, so we've got Soviets, we've got the Germans, the different types of units that are actually involved. So if you're wanting to put together everything that you need to play all the scenarios in this rulebook, this is where you start. So for example, it shows you each of the different the different scenarios here. These are the different names of them. So there's 11 in total, as you can see over here, and these are all up here, and it tells you how many of each of the different elements you are going to need in those games. So for example, let's have a look into the General's Guard. We need 2 commissars, 9 rifle squads. We also need 2 T-34s. We also need 1 divisional battalion company leader. So that tells you exactly how many elements you're going to have in your game. It's a great little thing. Also over here, on this final one here, it says total units needed to play all the scenarios. So this is the maximum of these. So this is the highest. So you look at this, you go, right, 16 rifle squads. I need 16 Soviet rifle squads, because in scenario in the Inferno, which is number 3, there are 16 rifle squads. So as long as I've got 16, I can cover everything. Really nice way of doing it. So it's just a quick way of being able to build your forces. You can check what you've got, check what you need, and build those up, and then by the time you get to that scenario, you know, you've probably got them put together. Nice and easy. Really nice way of doing that, really, I think. And then we have the scenarios themselves. Again, I'm not going to dwell on this too much, simply because I've already shown you some of these or similar things in here in the core book itself. But for example, you've got your background, you've got your aftermath, you've got your briefings with the elements that you'll be using. Then you've also got the rules for that particular scenario, any stats for those guns, so you can go straight to them. or vehicles, and then the layout of these buildings as well. And this is only on a 3x3 table, so this is a tiny table as well. A lot of these are 3x3 because it really shows the close-up fighting of the Stalingrad city fighting. So as I say, it just goes through everything, just explains all the bits and pieces. And you just move through these. So these are, it's not exactly a campaign in as such, but it's a lot of linked scenarios. So you're kind of following a campaign. You're not making decisions in between the campaign turns, but you are doing. There's a few bits and pieces here that will carry over, but in general, it's a ladder campaign basically, where you're following the specifics of the action. But just moving through, and you could just keep accounts of who's winning and who's losing as you go through. So here we are. Just run you through some of these as well. Again, each one is nicely illustrated, just to show you exactly how to set up. Again, tiny boards, 3 foot by 2 foot. These are 15mm. You can make them bigger if you wanted with 28mm. Other bits and pieces here, Dragon's Last Stand. Then we also have reference tables as well for the specific units that are used within this scenario as well. More order chips, initiative chips and markers and things that you might want to use as well, so you can use these, cut these out once again, get those used so that they've got a real nice period feeling to them. And then also just larger maps as well, so you can use these for the players to use to put their hidden movements in. Just print these out and just give them to them, and then they can stick their hidden units on. So we've got this for every single one of these. So a huge amount of coverage just in this one book. And this one is, let me see, I can't see how many pages it is actually. I'm not entirely sure how many pages it is. Quite a lot. But that brings me to the end of the Stalingrad and the Fireball Forward itself rules review. I hope you've enjoyed this. As I say, this is a really interesting set of rules. I think there's a lot in this. You don't even have to have Fireball Forward to have a look at these scenario books. I think these are well worth probably just grabbing anyway. If you're playing Second World War stuff, these will be easy fit into any other type of company level game. And I really think that it's something that will be a good fun for anybody to play, especially the amount of work that's gone into them. Alright, so I shall wrap up there. I shall say I think this is thoroughly worth it. Go out and buy yourself a copy, even just to have a look at, out of interest. But thanks for watching. If you have enjoyed this video, please do hit that like and subscribe. Leave me a comment. Tell me if you played Fireball Forward. Tell me what you think of it. And I will see you in the next Storm of Steel video.